The smartest child in human history is Christian Friedrich Heineken, who was born in Germany in 1721 and lived only a little over 4 years, had a tragic fate. The genius baby was born into the family of the artist Paul and the art dealer Katharina Elizabeth, who was also interested in alchemy. Christian was nicknamed the Lübeck baby. His intellectual abilities are considered the most incredible in the world at all times. If Christian had to take an IQ test today, his result would probably exceed 180. At the same time, he was not autistic. Like a sponge, the baby absorbed knowledge from various fields, not limiting himself to one subject. He was not withdrawn and communicated well with people, amazing them with his conclusions and harmonious speech. By the age of 10 months, and, according to other sources, by 2 months, the baby did not coo like his peers, but constructed articulate sentences. By the age of 1, Christian could recite the Bible Pentateuch by heart. By the age of 2, he had studied world history and could list the most important geographical discoveries without hesitation. He learned French and mastered Latin. At the age of 3, he switched to mathematics and biology, then to religious studies. His favorite book was the illustrated encyclopedia in Latin, The Sensual Picture of the World, by Jan Amos Kamensky, which the boy read until late at night. The little fidget loved to talk about the merits of Rhine wines or discuss the genealogy of the oldest German families. Christian Heineken was the second child, while his older brother lived to a ripe old age and followed in his parents' footsteps, linking his life with art. The child prodigy's parents were quite ordinary people. The father was an unknown architect and a mediocre artist, the mother sold art objects in her shop. The boy's upbringing was first entrusted to a nanny nurse, a strict and domineering woman who did not tolerate objections and believed that she knew exactly how to raise children correctly. Her teaching method, based on the principle of "what I see, I sing," hardly influenced the development of the baby's amazing abilities. Already at 10 months, the child began to repeat articulate words that his parents spoke. His nanny Sophie Hildebrandt was actively involved in his development. She snatched the baby from the cradle, brought him to the pictures and told him what was depicted on them, and then asked him to repeat. And Christian said what was depicted in the pictures. A governess from Silesia was hired for the child prodigy. And in 2 or 3 months, while his peers could only pronounce "mama" and "dada," he could list the main events from the first 5 books of the Bible. And at 2 years old, Christian was already quoting the Holy Scriptures. At the age of 3, the little genius began to study world history, geography, Latin, French, mathematics and biology, and when he was 4, mathematics and biology were added to these subjects. At the same time, the boy loved to communicate and chatted with everyone. His fame spread quickly. It got to the point that at the age of 3, Christian was invited to give a lecture at the Lübeck Gymnasium. According to the recollections of his contemporaries, he first made an excursion into the fates of the Roman and German emperors, and then moved on to the biographies of the ancient rulers of Israel and skillfully turned the topic towards the peculiarities of human anatomy. The audience was amazed and delighted, and at the end of his lecture, the boy said, "And now excuse me, gentlemen, I have to go to the nurse." His favorite book was The World of Sensual Things in Pictures, by Jan Amos Kamenius. It is also known that Christian inspired artists, writers, composers. For example, George Philipp Telemann dedicated several works to him. Immanuel Kant was also interested in the little boy. Christian knew a lot of things, even the characteristics of the Moselle wine varieties. He could also recite all the Psalms and talk about the most prominent families of Europe. The child spoke like an adult, gave high speeches, but it was difficult for him to hold a pen for a long time. At 3 years old, the genius boy spoke 4 languages fluently. The fame of the unusual boy quickly spread throughout the area, so frequent guests of the house, mostly representatives of the Bohemian world, certainly wanted to see the miracle with their own eyes. King Frederick IV of Denmark himself wanted to meet the young talent when he learned of his existence. Christian was brought to Copenhagen, and he gave several lectures on history before the king, citing sources. However, he refused to dine with the king, explaining that he only ate porridge and dishes made from grain and flour. It is believed that the world lost the most brilliant child in its history because of his diet and mental stress. For example, his nanny told him from birth that he should not eat animal products as a true Christian. The baby's health worsened. He could fall on the bed and moan from muscle pain, suffered from insomnia and lack of appetite, had a hard time with smells and sounds. He asked not to be disturbed and to constantly wash his hands. It is believed that these were symptoms of celiac disease, an illness caused by damage to the villi of the small intestine by certain foods containing gluten. Constant visits and work for the public exhausted the child greatly, but added authority and popularity to his parents. According to American psychologist Lita Stetter-Hollingworth, child geniuses are often simply not emotionally ready to solve serious philosophical and ethical problems, and this leads to tragedies, from madness to early death. Christian died in 1725. They say that he left as a philosopher. When his feet were treated with herbs, he said, "Our life is like smoke." In addition, he sang several of the 200 church songs he knew, read prayers and said, "God Jesus, take my spirit." The baby was very calm. There is a version that, unlike most people, his brain worked, so to speak, ahead of schedule. What the brain of an ordinary person generated in 10 years, Christian's brain assimilated in just a year or even less. That is, the growth of his body simply did not keep up with the development of the brain. But at the present time we cannot say anything with certainty about this phenomenon. And the scientific world of the 18th century did not bother to study Christian and his superdevelopment and superintelligence in detail. But the fact remains, in the history of mankind, there has not yet appeared such a wonderful child as Christian Friedrich Heineken. Could the baby from Lübeck have lived a long and happy life? Who is to blame for his early death? His vain parents, his wet nurse and her views on diet, nature, which endowed Christian with an excessive thirst for knowledge, which the child's body simply could not cope with. If he had been born in our time, the tragedy would probably have been avoided, but history, as we know, does not tolerate the subjunctive mood.